interesting. Our topic is when to get a new lawyer and perhaps the corollary of when not to.
Yeah,
oh,
good
I
question.
hear.
I myself am often plagued by the sociology behind the question, meaning what causes people to hire certain professionals and what causes people to switch certain professionals is somewhat of an existential sociological question. But today we're going to answer that question as it relates to divorce lawyers.
Yes, and I think it's an interesting one because you see there are some clients out there who have one lawyer the whole way through for years, and then you'll come across someone else who's maybe had 5 lawyers. So let's get to it and give our insight to our listeners on this topic.
Right. So let's actually let's banty this around. In the second half of our IG Live, let's talk about our own personal or professional experiences with clients that have left us to go to other lawyers and why clients have left other lawyers to come to us, obviously without mentioning any names or giving away anything that is of particular identifying features, but it might help our viewers understand what our professional experiences have been in this regard. But before we get there, let's talk about why do people choose certain lawyers and why do people choose to leave certain lawyers? And I'll kick it off with one answer. Oftentimes people should make the decision to hire a lawyer on intellectual bases, but reality is that most people hire lawyers for emotional or psychological reasons. In other words, they feel that that lawyer understands them. They feel that that lawyer has the skill set. They feel that they will be well served by that lawyer. Notice the word feel, as opposed to the client actually having done the research and having properly vetted candidates and arriving at the conclusion that that particular lawyer has the particular skill set to help them. So that's the sort of psychological, logical interplay when it comes to hiring lawyers, which, by the way, would apply at the other end in terms of switching lawyers as well. But I'd like to hear from you. Where do you sit on this, Leanne? What do you see as the driver of hiring and changing lawyers?
I think a lot of people, from what I've seen, that their initial lawyer is often somebody that they didn't put a lot of thought into. Often people, particularly if they're served with something and, now they're reading this document and they know they have to respond quickly, or even if they get a letter from their spouse's lawyer saying, within 10 days, have your lawyer respond, they get into a panic. And what happens is they start asking around to all the people they know, their friends and family, like, do you know a family lawyer? Do you know a family lawyer? And they get a referral from these people. And sometimes the referral may be somebody that the person who referred doesn't even necessarily know very well, but they just heard the name. Or sometimes it can be somebody who had a very different situation, but had a good experience with that lawyer. And so they refer them. So often people, they don't really interview. They don't put a lot of thought into it. They just kind of end up retaining the first lawyer that they're referred to and they meet with. And I think that can be very problematic because, as we said in the write-up on our post promoting today's show, there's different needs by a client and there's different types of lawyers. I mean, some cases require a lawyer who's a pit bull and some clients want a lawyer who's a pit bull. In some cases, a pit bull can be very, very bad and detrimental to a case and jack up costs. Some clients they need more hand holding and more compassion, and they need to feel like their lawyer does care and they're not just, it's not just a factory and the lawyer is unapproachable and they feel, uncomfortable raising issues. And so that needs to be factored in. And, sometimes people, they pick a lawyer, as they say, for the wrong reasons. And, then they get with the lawyer and then, the resulting issue comes up. should I change lawyers, or I've, been with this lawyer so long, should I stick it out with them? Because there are costs to change as well.
That's right. I'm going to take our viewers back a little bit to the question, does somebody always need a lawyer? And then, does somebody always need a lawyer who is a specialist or a generalist? Or does somebody always need a lawyer who is located in the same geography as where they live? I mean, these are all questions that are oftentimes not even asked. It occurred to me, just personally, about a year and a half ago, I wanted to hire somebody to provide me with tips and guidance on nutrition. And so I found myself entering into the Google search term, Toronto nutritionist. And then I stopped and I thought, does it really matter where the nutritionist is? And if the best nutritionist is in Kingston or in New Delhi, does it really matter, except of course for the time zone issue? So bringing it right back to clients and divorce lawyers, the reality is not every case requires a divorce lawyer. There are many cases where the person could be actually well served by a divorce coach, or by a mediator, or by a financial advisor. Yes, we bring significant value and skills to many, many cases, but not every case mandates the involvement of a divorce lawyer or mandates the involvement of a lawyer. There might be cases where just a generalist might be satisfactory for the client. So first question first is, does the case need a lawyer? And therefore, does the case need a specialist? And assuming the answer is yes to both, then the question becomes, what is the pool of lawyers that the person is looking at? If the pool of lawyers is the lawyer that the person goes onto Facebook and sends it out to all of their Facebook friends, who do you use? And it comes back with the same name 5 times. It may be that that's the right lawyer, but it may not be the right lawyer for that client, just because 5 other people said that's the lawyer that they used or that they heard of, doesn't necessarily mean it's the right match for that client. And so I think there's a lot of vetting that does not occur that ought to occur when people hire a lawyer. And that answers the question that is on our promo for today, which is, when to change lawyers. Because if you actually did a good job hiring the lawyer, if you gave it a lot of thought initially, and if you properly investigated the question, which obviously also involves properly investigating the qualifications, which is another way of saying investigating what your needs are. So if there's proper prep done in the process of hiring a lawyer, then the likelihood of changing lawyers is very low. But like you just said, Leanne, I find that there's a lot of people that enter into this process haphazardly. They base their decisions on what others have said to them. They haven't properly researched the subject matter, and they have ultimately made a decision based on gut as opposed to based on intellect. And I think one of the benefits of those listening to this today is that if they are themselves in the process of either making a decision to hire a lawyer or advising a friend on how to hire a lawyer, I think they would be well served by taking these ideas to mind and thinking about, what is it that I need, and who is it that I need, and where is it that I need that, and for how long do I need that? These are some very large questions that need to be answered before somebody signs on.
I agree. And I also think that we as lawyers also have an obligation to properly screen clients who we take on, because I found when I was first starting out, I had more of a tendency, I just wanted to get business, so I would accept almost anyone as a client, whereas I find now I'm much choosier. I still sometimes there's some errors in my process sometimes, but I want to make sure that I take on clients where I am a good match and I'm going to best be able to serve them and their needs. And I know what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are. And so if I have a client who comes through the door and they want a certain approach and I know that's not me, I think I have an obligation as a lawyer to turn that client away and, perhaps refer them to somebody if I know someone who I think would be a better fit, but not to just, take on every single person who, comes through the door, because it is a really important relationship. I mean, our clients are going through one of the worst experiences of their life, and they're really relying on their divorce lawyer to guide them through this. So that fit is super important from both perspectives.
I myself get called quite a bit by people who are leaving their existing lawyer. Sometimes they're leaving their second lawyer, and they come to me. I'm oftentimes lawyer number 2, 3, or 4 on high conflict divorce cases, mostly ones that are either in court or in arbitration. And so they come to me, and this has gone on now for quite some time, but today, for example, I had somebody, and they were telling me about the lawyer that they have, and that's why they're on the phone with me. And I have actually taken quite a bit of interest in trying to understand the human nature. Why is it that somebody goes to a lawyer, and why is it that somebody leaves a lawyer? And in the pursuit of me trying to understand this, which is really trying to understand human psychology and human behavior, I've learned that people really don't know what they want. And one of the things that they need to understand is, who are they and what do they want? And then how do they want it served to them? And then if the person does enough internal work to figure that out, then they can do the external work to find the right lawyer that matches their needs. And to your point, Leanne, I'm a family law specialist. I don't really know much about other areas of law. And therefore, people think that I know everything about every aspect of family law, which I don't. And so in the last few years, I've had occasion to say to people who think that I know everything about every area of family law, that they have a very distinct area that they would be better served by somebody that might be actually less of an expert than me in all of family law, but more of an expert than me in one very narrow area of family law. So, for example, a recent one came up where it was an appeal of an arbitration award granted by a family arbitrator. So I strongly encouraged the client to, and I actually did the work for the client in searching out that person to be able to find the right match for them on that very narrow issue. Another one came up just in the last week where a client wanted to retain me involving the subject matter of a declaration of paternity over a child that was conceived with donated sperm. Very interesting material, very interesting matter. I'm not the expert on that subject. There are other people that are far more knowledgeable on that than me. And so this does involve a fairly, it's a dialogue, but it's a mutuality of exchange, of honesty, of candor on what do they need and what can I or you, Leanne, provide the client. And I think one of the takeaways from today's conversation is that there needs to be more of a dialogue around the subject matter of what do I need and what can I offer, which oftentimes is usurped by the motivation to quickly lock in a lawyer because the person is living in a state of fear and anxiety and they want to have somebody in their corner ASAP, and that will help them reduce their anxiety level. And in some cases, what they don't realize is they're increasing their anxiety level, because if they're not properly matched up, they're only going to be back to where they started, but possibly even in a worse situation than where they were at the beginning.
That's true. And another mistake along those same lines that I see people making is this sort of idea of the lawyer as a friend. And I mean, I want my clients to like me. I don't want them to have a negative opinion of me. But at the end of the day, it is a professional relationship. And I know myself I went through a civil litigation experience many years ago. And I remember in my particular case, I did not like my lawyer. I found him he was just not very friendly. He made nasty quips to my brother and I, but he was good and he did what we needed him to do. And so I kept having to remind myself that, you know what, I'm not hiring him to be my friend. I have friends. I'm hiring him for a very specific purpose, and he's good at that, and he's doing that. And so I think, you know, while in family law, it's a little bit more of a personal relationship. You know, ideally you want to like your lawyer, but you do have to remember why you're hiring them, what it is for, what you want them to do. And you need to have a working relationship, but it doesn't mean you have to be, you know, best friends. There can be things you don't like about them, and that's okay.
Eddie Greenspan, the esteemed, the revered, the well-known Eddie Greenspan, who has left us as a criminal defense lawyer and one of the best lawyers in Canada, used to say, and this is more applicable to criminal law, but also in family law, I defend, I do not befriend. And that goes to your point, Leanne. It's so critical. And I'll tell you, for the clients, the client does not want their divorce lawyer to be their friend. And if the client says, I would like my divorce lawyer to be someone that I am friends with or friendly with, they've already started on the wrong foot. The reason for that is you want your divorce lawyer to be detached, impartial, and objective. And if they are your friend, if they know too much about your personal life, if they have the ability to make comments about your case in a way that is crossing the line, potentially too personal, potentially unprofessional, then it really does not serve the client well. You really want someone that comes from a place of neutrality and objectivity, that cannot come from a person that is too personal with the client. And so as much as the client chooses the lawyer that they feel most comfortable with, from a sociological standpoint, it's understood. From a professional standpoint, it's often a mistake. And that familiarity breeds the beginnings of a problematic relationship, because it's not about the friendship that you're hiring the person. It's about their expertise and their ability to achieve a particular outcome for you. And the other thing I want to say is that when hiring a lawyer, you are not just hiring a lawyer, you're hiring the lawyer's staff too.
That's true.
And oftentimes the client thinks my lawyer is so-and-so. They don't talk about the staff. They don't talk about the importance of staff. But you and I, Leanne, know how critical our teams are to our ability to meet the needs of the client, whether it's collecting data, whether it's preparing documents, whether it's filing, whether it's actually getting on the phone, the staff that is, getting on the phone with the courthouse to make things happen, getting on the phone with a law clerk for the other lawyer to make things happen. So the quality of the staff, I would say, it's either equally important to the lawyer of choice, possibly even more valuable than the lawyer that one chooses.
I totally agree with that. The quality of the staff is so important, and the client's relationship with the staff is, very important, and the trust level they have in them, that they're, going to do what they need to do, forward documents to them as quickly as possible, forward emails, things like that. It's very important, because often, I know if you're a litigator like you and I both are, Steve, I'll be in court. And so it's my staff often that clients are, that's the first point of contact and who they're dealing with quite often, on a more regular basis than myself. So it is a really important relationship.
And for those people on the who are watching, you should know that every few months, the province of Ontario's court system issues these things called notices to the profession. And that's sort of like if you play a sport, the league sending out a new set of rules on how the game is to be played. Well, if you don't know the rules, you're going to lose the game. And so our law clerks tend to become the experts in those rules. So for example, we now have a new rule. It says a case conference brief must be served 1 week before the case conference, and it cannot be more than 8 pages in length. Well, guess what happens if a law clerk serves the proper length of a brief, but 6 days before the case conference? It might not get filed, in which case the case might be adjourned by 6 months in some courts. What if the law clerk serves on the right day, but it's 8 pages, 9 pages? It doesn't get filed. And so these are small examples of the importance of law clerks. I had somebody call me the other day and say, I'm firing my lawyer and I'm hiring you. I said, why? Because I waited 6 months for my case conference, but my lawyer's law clerk didn't file the confirmation. And so therefore the hearing got adjourned.
Oh, that's not good. Yeah.
Well, if you are sitting on pins and needles waiting for your October 4 case conference, and you've been waiting 3, 4, 5 months for that October 4 case conference, and then you find out that after all that, and not to mention the bill that they received for the preparation for that case conference, they then find out that no Zoom link was sent for that case conference because the confirmation didn't go in, and it's got bumped to July. That frustration is completely understandable. Was it the lawyer's fault? Maybe, maybe not. But was it the law clerk's inability to meet the deadline or know the rules? I don't know. So let's take the rest of our time now to talk about a couple of our experiences. And I'm going to share two with you. And then I'd like to hear yours, Leanne. One positive and one negative. Although some would say they're both positive. I have clients who say to me, you know, I hired you because I read what you wrote about, and then they mentioned some particular part of their case. Or I watched a video where you discussed XYZ, a particular part of their case. That to me is proper research and proper vetting, because obviously they were doing their own research to ascertain which lawyer knew what about that various subject, which is good. And so that's an example where people do their research, possibly look for referral sources from others. I've had people, and I had one recently, they said, you know, I ended up hiring you. Why? Because 3 different things pointed me to you. One, I went onto canley.org and I was reading cases that deal with a fact scenario that's similar to mine, and you were the lawyer on 3 of the 8 cases that I read that dealt with similar facts. And by the way, Mr. Benmor, I know that you lost 2 and you won 1. So I'm not about the win or lose, but I do see that you know what I need you to know about that various subject matter. So that's a good example of someone. And they said, well, and I also saw your name on an article, and I also saw you, and somebody mentioned your name to me when I asked them if they could take my case. They said, I can't, but he can. So right away, I knew that all arrows were pointing to you. Okay, so that's a good story. Another one, which, you know, these are cases that I'll always laugh about some of these. I was lawyer number 2, and this woman hired me. And I was representing her for, I can't remember how many months, 4 or 5 months. She hired me because she wanted, her case was going to trial. And her lawyer said, I can't do the trial. I'm not good enough at doing trials, but go hire another lawyer. And she ended up hiring me. I ended up settling her case on the eve of trial. And it saved her quite a bit of money and aggravation. But in closing, she said, you know, I just want you to know something, Mr. Benmor. I don't like you. You're a very powerful and forceful speaker. And when you spoke to me, you spoke very forcefully. You weren't particularly kind or generous. You were very domineering. I said, okay, well, that's good feedback. Thank you very much. So why did you stay? She goes, those were the skills that I needed from a lawyer to be able to get my case completed. And so although I don't like you, I needed you. And you actually came through with the very qualities that I needed you to have that I personally don't care for myself. I found that to be interesting feedback.
I think ultimately it's good feedback, though. So those are two good stories.
Yes. Tell me about you. Tell me about cases where either you have been hired because of something that you offer, or they have left you because of something that you could not offer, or at least they didn't think you could.
I tend to get a lot of clients who are in marriages or relationships where they're being abused. And, you know, the clients who come to me, you know, who are in that type of situation, they actually have done their research because they've looked at my background and my profile. They know that I was an assistant Crown attorney for over 16 years. My specialty was domestic violence. I was, in fact, the lead prosecutor in that area in my office for over 10 years. And I've continued with knowledge and training in that area. So I do tend to get a lot of clients who come to me for that reason. They've researched me. They've heard about me in that space. And, you know, again, I think those are people who've done their research and are coming to me for the right reasons. I get people who listen to my podcasts or listen to our lives, and, you know, or follow me on social media even. And, you know, I think that they get an exposure to who I am, what I'm like as a person, my professional knowledge. And they feel that they can trust me and that they kind of already know me a little bit from having listened to my podcast and seen me on social media. And I think that those are fair reasons as well for coming to me. I do get some clients where I'm, you know, the second, third, fourth, you know, lawyer along the way. I recently had, you know, an experience with someone who, I think I was the fourth lawyer, which, I mean, I'm going to say it, we haven't really brought it up in this podcast, but it can be sometimes a flag to me if someone has gone through multiple lawyers before coming to me. And not necessarily, it could just be, you know, there's good reasons that somebody has, that's the journey that they've been on. But sometimes it can be a flag, you know, that the client maybe has expectations that are going to be hard to meet, or, you know, just that they could have picked these other lawyers for the wrong reason. I don't know. But I had someone who came to me and she was a victim of abuse, and her previous lawyer was really not doing a very good job. And I felt so bad for her. And I took her on, and, you know, I'm still working with her. But at the last court appearance, the judge even commented, like, to her, "I'm so glad you got another lawyer." So, you know, that was nice feedback to be able to help her. But I have had situations too where I took on a client, and in my gut, I kind of had that feeling that, oh, I don't know, that this maybe is not, this is, maybe I should be turning them away. But I went against my gut feeling and took them on. And, you know, later did regret it. My gut kind of proved me right that we weren't a good fit. Their expectations and their personality were not a good match with me. And then they parted ways, and, you know, I was happy they parted ways, and I'm assuming they were happy they parted ways. It just, you know, it didn't work out. And that's okay too.
You know, for the benefit of our viewers, yeah, in our line of work, the concept of DV, or domestic violence or intimate partner abuse, is a phraseology that is used quite regularly. It's a big part of our line of work, is the role of inequality of bargaining power, domestic violence. Sometimes it's forms of abuse that are not physical in nature, emotional, psychological, verbal, sometimes religious, financial abuse. So for the benefit of our viewers, I can't underscore enough what you just said, Leanne, about how you have, you know, 2 decades worth of professional knowledge and experience in dealing with domestic violence, and how valuable and that, by the way, is an area of specialization. There are lawyers that have that level of knowledge, and they actually, like you, have knowledge of the law, but they also have knowledge of how to effectively manage the client, the judge, the other client, the other spouse, and the other lawyer when you're dealing with such a sensitive topic. And so I really tip my hat to you, Leanne, on being able to remain active and busy in this line of work where you take on that kind of caseload, because what we have, there's been lots of psychologists and social workers that have commented on this to us lawyers, that it's very common for you to experience a derivative trauma from that kind of work, because for the client, they have one domestic violence case. But for you, Leanne, you might have 10, 20, or 30 domestic violence cases. And that's a lot to carry and still maintain your balance and equilibrium and be effective in court and in the office. So I just want to applaud you for that.
Thank you. That's nice to hear from you. And I mean, I certainly applaud you. And you're a great mentor to me as well, in addition to being a great lawyer. So I am very grateful for that. I'm grateful for your wife too, that she brought us together.
Thank you. So let's wrap up by telling our viewers that the idea of hiring a lawyer or changing a lawyer or firing a lawyer is unto itself a project that requires planning, thought, deployment, research, and then soundboarding. And the process of hiring a lawyer or changing a lawyer is something that should be given significant consideration and care. And it's not one that should be dealt with easily, swiftly, or simply. And last point, and you made this point before about flags when someone changes lawyers. When I myself am consulted by someone who wants to change a lawyer, I remind the client of two risks that are the contrary side of changing a lawyer. One risk is when you change lawyers, now you need to pay lawyer number 2 to review the file and get to know everything that has occurred from the beginning to now. And I know lawyers today that will not accept a new retainer as lawyer number 2. They will only take cases from the beginning because of that. The other issue or risk is exactly what you just said a minute ago, Leanne, which is if you're flagging it, what will the other side do with that information? And what will the judge ascertain? Now, judges, by the way, will never say, well, she or he is on lawyer number 3 or 4. She must be the problem. They won't say that out loud, but they think it. And so I will caution people against changing lawyers, and I will support them in maintaining their existing legal representation. And sometimes I offer to stay on as a person that provides coaching, tips, and guidance on how to successfully proceed down the path that they are already on with their existing legal representation, in order to just make sure they actually get to the finish line, because that's really what we're all after. The clients, the children, the judges, the lawyers, the mediators really want the conflict to be over, and they do not want to prolong it through the process of successive changes in legal representation.
No, I think that's all very true and well said. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of our listeners for their kind comments to us today. One is Speak Your Mind, the podcast. She is always tunes into our lives. And Carla, we really appreciate your comments, your feedback, and you listening to us speak on these topics. And then as well, the single parent coach, Jennifer, thank you for your lovely comments about Steve and I. And we appreciate, you tuning in as well. And both of you guys do great work in your areas as well.
Thank you. Until next week, take care.
We'll see you then. Bye, Steve.
Bye.